This episode contains discussions of sexual assault. Please take care while listening and feel free to skip this episode if the content may be distressing. Hello, and welcome back to Lovely. Happy Friday. I hope wherever you are thriving, you're happy, and you're hydrated. Today's episode kind of came together in a very organic way. I was recording with a previous guest that we had on Lovely, Danielle Bezalel, and we were talking about dating, of course, but specifically how dating right now feels very optics focused. The question that is on everyone's mind is not, do I like this person? Do I feel compatible with this person? But it's a lot more of like, how do we look together? And that's where I brought this concept of like, we're living in a world of aesthetic capitalism, which is the idea that like our bodies and relationships and even healing, I feel, have become things that we curate and we manage. And then on top of that, you layer digital self-surveillance, right? So photos, stories, videos, screenshots, group chats. And suddenly it's really sad, but you're not in the experience anymore. You're watching yourself live it. Today's guest, Julia Sunderland, who is a somatic therapist and a scholar. Her work is all about how this constant self-monitoring could breed self-objectification. And, I'll definitely have Julia explain this in her own words and kind of figure out the emotional thesis behind that. Her work focuses on what it actually looks like to come back into the body without turning healing into yet another performance. Julia, welcome to Lovely. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, I was very, very passionate on this topic. But before we kind of get into all of it, as I love to ask all my guests on their upbringing and immigrant identity. So maybe let's start here.
It's funny. It only dawned on me like recently that my mom's an immigrant, which I know is probably pretty counterintuitive. She's from Australia, so she is pretty well hidden in the United States in the scheme of things. I think that she did have her own experience with assimilating to the US and also finding her people. She probably also had two children, myself included, trying to assimilate her. And I never really realized until I actually started my doctorate program that like my mom is an immigrant and I am in some ways, a child of an immigrant. My mom is of Scottish descent, in a lot of ways blends in really well in the United States until, she starts talking and someone might say, "Where are you from?" I've also been thinking about my dad. Is from Boston. He is of English descent. My mom's of Scottish descent, but from Australia. Thinking a little bit about the lineage of someone descending from colonization. Like many systems of oppression, colonization oppresses both the land and the people of the land that they're colonizing. And so as I've been in my program, in my doctorate program, have both been thinking about my own experience as a daughter of an immigrant, but also my experience of being descendants of, colonization.
I guess I'm curious to know, how did your upbringing shape your relationship with your body and how you learned to see yourself? I feel like for the last decade or so, we were so focused on how are we being perceived? How are we being perceived by others? But because it is now drilled in our head to think about that, before we can even get there, it's like, well, how do we see ourselves? So what did you kind of see and learn from your parents in terms of what beauty standards were acceptable?
I grew up in Texas, and the experience of growing up in Texas, being surrounded by so many churches, we also went to a church, and the layering of Christianity into how we think about ourselves, how we think about our bodies, how we think about right and wrong, pleasure, sin, all those kind of things. I think being in kind of that Bible Belt area, even if it wasn't in my home life, just being in that area of Dallas, I think got woven into my self concept and how I think about my body as well.
And what do you think, if you don't mind sharing, like are you religious now, and kind of what impact did being in the church have in terms of how you think about your body and how you think others are allowed to feel about it?
I don't affiliate with a particular religion. I do define myself to be very spiritual. I do, yeah, feel very, I have a lot of my own spiritual practices, and I do believe in a larger, bigger organizing function, call it love or consciousness, whatever it might be. But more specifically, thinking about growing up within Christianity, I remember these experiences in church being like, wait, who do we get to look up to? Who do women get to look up to in the Bible? And you have Mother Mary, but once you have sex and you're no longer a virgin, do you get to look up to Mother Mary? Like, if you no longer relate to her in your virgin status, like, who do you get to then look up to? And I know that there are a lot of other leading characters that are women in the Bible, but from my experience, it was like, okay, either you get Mother Mary and you're a virgin your whole entire life, or you have Eve and you sinned and you get kicked out of Eden. And I felt pretty lost within the church. And not only that, I think the emphasis around virginity and purity and innocence is really tricky, because how do you have a really healthy, beautiful, sexual, pleasurable sex life while maintaining this value of innocence and virginity? So I think it was really tough to navigate as I became a woman who wanted to be in intimate relationships with other folks, and not have that lingering like religious shame in the mix as well.
You almost feel like there was a big pressure on being presentable in a way that felt bigger than just appearance, right? It's not just like how you look, but it's like they're putting you in these different boxes. And then you kind of have no sense of identity. I guess just for everyone tuning in who may not be familiar with the term self objectification, what does it mean for people that don't know?
Self objectification comes from feminist research, and specifically a group of women got together, started thinking about what are the consequences of being sexually objectified. So it's probably not unknown for most people that oftentimes women are sexualized and viewed as objects by media, society, patriarchy. And to be objectified specifically means to be looked at as a body or a collection of body parts that are valuable only for the consumption or use by others. So, what is not said in that definition is, if someone is objectified, their subjective experience is ignored. So, a good example of that is when you're in a sexual experience with someone and they are only looking to receive pleasure and they're not looking to provide it or offer it in the other direction. That person who is not receiving any pleasure is being treated as an object. And oftentimes this also happens in media. So there's this kind of removal of a woman as a person, as a whole person, as someone who has subjective thoughts, experiences, and feelings. When we think about living in a sexually objectifying world, these women came together and asked, okay, what are the consequences of that? How does that impact women? And how does it impact their lived experience? And they realized that because women know that they're going to be viewed as objects, they know they're going to be viewed and judged from the outside, women learn to do that preemptively to themselves.
I'm really curious to know kind of more on the background of yourself. Like when I'm hearing this, obviously I don't love this idea, right? That like why are our bodies positioned and presented for different purposes to almost like lure people in, not for the right reasons. But I guess I want to know, did something happen that really made you react in a way where you're like, I need to make it my mission to understand and move this forward?
I maybe being born a woman.
Yeah.
Is that a cop out of an answer?
No, no, no. It is like full stop. That is the answer. I get it.
I can unpack that a little bit more for you, though, of course. So in college, I was sexually assaulted and then had a series of years where I blamed it on my body, blamed it on my body for being assaulted. And I perpetuated kind of this narrative around it was my body's fault that I got into this situation. And at the same time, moved to San Francisco. I was like, oh my gosh, sexual liberation. What does that mean? What does that look like? And I went to Folsom Street Fair and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so I was trying to find what it means to be a sexual woman while also blaming my body on a bad thing that happened to me. And so I think, I don't know about other folks if they get caught in this catch 22 of like wanting to be sexually liberated, but then also and wanting to experience my body, wanting to experience pleasure, while also thinking that the pleasure that my body experiences or looks for is a bad thing or has gotten me in trouble in the past. And so I came across self objectification theory and it just consolidated and clarified a lot of my personal experiences around how I was relating to my body as a result of the experiences I had in college and becoming a sexual person, an individual.
Thank you for trusting me by sharing that. I can't even imagine how difficult it always is to carry that and experience that. So I'm really, really sorry. If someone is listening right now and has gone through that experience and was in their mind about blaming themselves, what message would you give to them that you kind of have learned and that has helped you?
I don't know if this answers it directly, but what has been my mantra or like where I have landed is becoming my body's best friend. Like, what can I do to become my body's best friend on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And when we think about objectification and how we objectify our bodies, we think of our body as a thing or a tool, or in some cases, the source of something bad that happened to me. But in order to subjectify something, in order to uh, see it as more than just something to be used, in order to see my body as something more to be used, I wanted to like relate to it in a new way. I wanted to become my body's best friend rather than being my body's like frenemy or biggest critic or um, I don't know, like even police in some ways. How can I befriend my body? And uh, if you have experienced any form of assault, physical, sexual, I think that there's ways that we store the trauma in our bodies. We can blame our bodies for what has happened. And I think the healing process largely consists of forgiving as well as forming a new relationship with the body as well.
I really like the term of being best friends with your body because I also think that when something traumatic happens to you, you obviously have PTSD. And like you said, that remains and is stored in your body. And then when you start to hate your body for things that it had obviously no part in, it impacts every aspect of your life. It impacts your self confidence and dating, just because we're talking about dating and relationships. But my experience is a little different, but I think something that comes up for me when I think of self objectification, for the longest time as I was growing up, I was very sheltered, right? I was always told what I could wear, what I couldn't wear. So modesty was a big thing, and purity was also another big thing, right? That was the common thread. So then when I finally got the chance to live life on my own terms, I actually like my body and I like to wear things that make me feel confident. Sometimes they can be viewed as being very promiscuous, or they can be viewed as, when men are looking at me, their attention is going to my chest area, right? So then the types of people that are interested in me are only looking for one thing. And that also makes you angry at yourself, being like, well, if I wasn't wearing this or if I wasn't putting this out there, then I would attract a different type of clientele. And I went through that tug of war for years and years of my life. Obviously, now becoming best friend to your body, you realize that what other people choose to perceive of you is none of your business and is not your fault. So I'm learning that too, but that is one thing that I have really, really struggled with. And I'm trying to find that balance within myself too.
This piece around how we present to the world, is it our fault or is it the perceiver? And the fault being the tricky piece here. Like, you should be able to show up in the world however makes you feel most yourself and the most expressive. But this system that we live in of perception and visual aesthetics, and also just the cultural habit to sexualize women, it creates such a complicated experience of getting dressed. It shouldn't be that hard to get dressed and express yourself.
But it's becoming harder and harder because you know what? I feel like not only did we have to kind of worry about the male gaze, but it's also the female gaze now. And I think it's important to bring to the conversation how women view other women. Your immediate instinct is to scan other women's bodies, but I don't think it's always jealousy or competition. I almost think because of this self-objectification, it's like ranking for safety, right? It's not like who's better, but it's like if I'm in this room with everyone else, where do I land in the room? So what are your thoughts on just doing that within ourselves?
Oh, the judgment is so real. Like, I got off social media for a while because I was just scrolling past people's photos and like being critical and judgmental of them. And it's like, what is this? Why can't I be happy for them? Why is there all this comparison? And I love that scanning for safety. When we think about self objectification, one of the consequences for women is an increased anxiety, increased body surveillance, but then also increased anxiety around, am I safe? Am I, do I look good enough to meet people's approval, but not so good that I attract the wrong attention? And as I hear you talk about like scanning for safety, there's like a, am I safely somewhere in the middle where I'm not like an outcast for looking disheveled, but I'm also not like the top of the top and will be like targeted by sexual violence. And there's so many layers to getting dressed and being in social settings, and the constant headspace that is taken up by figuring out where you stand amongst people. It's exhausting and it's a lot of work. And it really also, it does take away from being present in the moment, like you were speaking to before. It takes away from being in flow states. It takes away from joy and like actually remembering an experience. Sometimes I just remember the anxiety I was feeling rather than the experience itself. Yeah, it's complicated.
I really resonated with the line. It's like, how do we look good or great in a way that we feel good about it, but we don't want to do too much because it's going to attract the wrong type of attention. I guess my question is, how do we interrupt that pattern without like turning on ourselves?
I think the first piece is just awareness and recognizing that there are so many systems at play and it's not our fault. When we get dressed, if something happens because of the way we're dressed, it's not because of the way we dressed. It's because of the systems that continually take advantage of women, or patriarchy creating this hierarchy of men over women. And I think being aware of the systems at play really shifts some of the burden that we carry as women into a more neutral place of seeing it systemically. And the other piece that that comes to mind for me is like, okay, what do we do now? When we objectify ourselves, we are viewing ourselves from the outside. We're criticizing ourselves from the outside. So one of the really important pieces is to actually get back into the body and I also want to recognize that it can be really hard to get back into the body because for a lot of folks, the body is the source of the trauma. Like it was the ground that trauma took place on. And it can be really hard to get into the body. However, as we take little baby steps, whether that's meditating or going to yoga classes or going to get a massage, whatever it is that helps you get back into your lived experience, that will help offset some of the external self objectification, self criticism. One of the things that I am trying to do on a more regular basis is flip the script. So when I see someone who's just absolute, like when I see someone at the gym and the first thing that comes to mind is criticizing them, I try to flip it and just like cheer them on in my head. And because I notice that as I do that more for other people, I also do that more for myself. And I think it is a positively vicious cycle in that sense.
It's very true. What you criticize in others and other things, you think others are criticizing the same of you.
Yeah.
What you hold so close to your chest in terms of your appearance and what you're thinking about someone, it's never truly like that. It's just, it's heightened in your own brain. And that feeds into dating, which is kind of what I want to pivot to next is in modern dating. What are the impacts of self objectification? Like, how does that manifest in dating? And also, very curious to know, are you like dating anyone? What's your relationship status?
I have a boyfriend. Yes, we've been together for about to be 3 years. Lucky for him, I started my doctorate program right around the same time that we started dating. And so he's been with me for the ride, all the highs and the lows. And he is the first person that gets to hear about all of the sexual objectification theories that I'm learning about. So something that is connected is being in a strong relationship. It is funny how that does build some of this confidence to start exploring some of these other things, like being in a strong mutual relationship, loving relationship. I have noticed that I'm able to explore more of these concepts in ways that I hadn't when I was single. I think that there is something about being in a partnership.
Can you elaborate how, maybe like a specific story with someone in terms of like how dating was different and then how is it different now? And also curious on the topics of like aesthetic capitalism. Did optics ever enter the room when it came to you and your partner?
I guess it's going to sound so like trite, but like worthiness. I think, especially when we think about these layers, like being a woman and seeing myself as unlovable in a lot of different ways, and then entering into like an unconditionally loving relationship. It's like it forces me to rewrite some of these narratives that I have about myself. And then as you're, speaking about aesthetics, I think we were both very attracted to each other from the get go. And we didn't have dating apps in play for our relationship. So I don't remember going onto his Instagram and like looking too much of his photos because we met in a different way. But I also recognize that that's not how things happen in this day and age. And it's really tough. It's really hard. And I will also like I was on Hinge, I was on Tinder and Bumble and all of those, like swiping and looking at people and having those judgmental moments come up. And I think one piece that is connected to self objectification is our self concept. We build our self concept sometimes by looking at photos of us. And if we don't think we're photogenic, then that can have a really detrimental impact to our self concept. So much of our social capital is based on images these days. If you feel like you're not captured well in images, it can have a massive blow to your confidence. And it's something that gets reinforced every time you see an image of yourself. And not only just images, every time you see yourself in the mirror, that can reinforce a negative self concept, a negative body image. I did a mirror detox for 7 days because I wanted to get away from images of myself, including my reflection. So I didn't use my selfie camera. I tried to not look at photos of myself. I covered all of the mirrors in my apartment. And I really wanted to get to know myself and my body from the inside and like the lived experience of my body rather than through images.
Please walk me through this. You can't look at you just can't look at yourself in any screen or mirror. How did you go through life? Like, what?
It's a great question. I covered all of the mirrors in my apartment, and then I avoided using the front camera on my phone. But I didn't put on makeup. I wore outfits that I knew I would like. So I kind of did a few things to buffer and like not be as terrified going out into the world after like not seeing a mirror. The days that I did go to school or to class or out grocery shopping, it was really scary. Like the fear of not knowing what I looked like before going out into the world, it really was shocking. That was a really helpful like wake up call of like, oh, I want everything to be perfect because I feel like if I'm not perfect, I'm not going to survive. But a few days into the mirror detox, I was taking a shower and I was like scrubbing my arms and I was like, oh my gosh, my arms. And for like the first time, I was like living in my arms rather than looking at them being like, oh, they aren't strong enough. They're not toned enough. They're not this enough. Like the narratives that I held about my body seemed to like drift away a little bit. And I was actually in my body as a place and as an experience and as like a relationship rather than, as you said, a tool.
I find dating to be very exhausting these days. And I was just scrolling through Instagram as I always do. I'm chronically online. Maybe that is my problem. And I saw this post and maybe like, let me get your reaction to it and we can kind of like dissect it a little bit. I follow this account and has like 1.7 million followers. So, you know, a lot of people follow it and sometimes it's funny content. And I'm pretty sure it's written by a man. There were two slides. The first slide said, bring back men who plan dates, buy flowers, and pay for everything. I read that slide and I was like, okay, that's kind of the bare minimum of effort. And then the second slide said, well, bring back women who deserve it. I don't know. I kind of felt like this really unexpected, like a wave of anger, kind of. And I was like, well, why is this bothering me so much? And I couldn't figure it out at first because on the surface, like, sure, it's a joke. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized like what it was doing. And I feel it reframes basic care as a reward. Again, something that women have to qualify for. We shift back into this dynamic where men are the gatekeepers of effort and women again are under evaluation. It closely mirrors self-objectification and then it turns dating into performance. And then no longer is it, do we feel good together? But am I good enough to earn care? So I guess my question to you is, do you see this kind of discourse reinforcing self-objectification in dating?
The male gaze is such a strong force in our society, and male approval is also such a strong force in our society. And what I'm hearing in that, especially like women who deserve it, the like if we were to double click into that, like what does deserving it mean and by whose standards? And it's probably by the standards of the person who's in power. And right now in our society, it's given racism and patriarchy. We have white men who are the ones who determine the people who deserve that care and that baseline of respectability and relationship. I very much see the power of male gaze and male approval as something that continues to reify self objectification and further entrench it into our society. I was recently reading a book called Girl on Girl, which I think you would absolutely love. And I am forgetting the author's name. I apologize. But the book basically tracks culture from the 80s to today and how culture has influenced how women are perceived. And towards the end of the book, she cites some research that showed that men who love women, their love is an act of resistance towards patriarchy. Men who honestly love women in those societies where marriage is actually based off of love, there's more equality, there's better standards of living for women, whereas cultures where men and women are married as ways to further family power, so on and so forth. Women have far fewer rights. So I guess I both am seeing male gaze as a power and a force that, yeah, furthers self objectification, but it also can be used for good. Like our relationships can be used for good and transforming our societies. And so I don't want to make all the wonderful men that are out there in the world outcasts.
And I 100% agree. Like, I don't want to push this narrative that all men are trash, because all men are not trash. There are obviously good ones out there. I'm sure you are with one. Men who love women say fuck the patriarchy. They have that mindset. And I totally agree with that. What is something your partner does that there's this trend going on, TikTok. It's like things my partner does that would send a low effort man into a coma. So not exactly that, but like, what is something your partner does that you can use that as a good example to be like, there are good men out there?
I'm very fortunate that my boyfriend is a fantastic cook. And so on a regular basis, he's the one in the kitchen and not me. But I think double clicking into something more relational, I can feel the dedication that my boyfriend has to our relationship and how much he works on himself to build the skills for intimacy, for communication, for equality in our relationship. And I will also say for repairing, because there's always going to be fights. I think that oftentimes when there is a substantial power differential in a relationship, the guy doesn't have to say sorry, or the guy doesn't have to take on learnings from the conflict. The guy doesn't have to integrate takeaways from what happened. And I think that I feel very fortunate that my boyfriend is very emotionally intelligent as a baseline, but also dedicated to integrating learnings and lessons and taking on feedback and also apologizing. So I think that for me is that would probably send a low effort guy running, I imagine.
I love this practice of asking my guests a question that they can leave for my next guest. So, what is it that you would like to ask them?
I would be curious to know what does it look like for them as their body's best friend? What are they doing in their day to day, their life to befriend their body? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
I am very excited to ask that and receive my answers. I want to say thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your work with us, sharing your life story with us. And I guess anyone that is listening that would benefit from anything that you've shared, or any like final messages that you would like to leave to our listeners, would love to give you the floor to do that.
Another trite little saying, I think it really is the journey and not the destination. Like, we're all searching for the perfect body and wanting it to look the most amazing in photos in a bathing suit. And we could always keep searching for that perfect moment. But what if we already are there? What if we already could enjoy the body that we have? I really do think that is possible, to not keep striving for a future body, but really be present with the body that we have today and show up in relationship to it, despite whatever our history might be in the past.
Let's not time travel with our bodies and focus on how it looked in the past and how it's going to look on the future. How is it making you feel today? I love that. I love that. And if more and more people want to learn about your work and kind of, see what Julia's all about, do you want to plug in your socials?
So they can find me at Joyfully Julia with 2 A's at the end on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate you being on the episode today.
It's not every day that I get to nerd out with someone on self-objectification. So yeah, glad to jump in.
Okay, everyone, that is it for our episode today. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today, and maybe this will inspire you kind of be mindful of how often you are relying on your appearance as a tool as opposed to just, making it a place to live, and kind of checking in with yourself and being your own body's best friend is, I think, one of my biggest takeaways. And I'm going to practice that more mindfully. And like always, can't wait to bring on a lot of our other exciting guests that we have planned for you, and tune in every week for more Lovely. Lovely is an Immigrantly media production. This episode was produced by Sadia Khan and Shay Yu, written by me, Mahek. Theme music, sound design, and editing by Lou Raskin. Other music is by Epidemic Sound. Tune in every Friday for more Lovely.